Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to get a good Doum, tek, and ka on the Darbuka. Before we get started, I want to make sure everybody's holding the drum correctly. So it should sit in your lap like this. It should be cradled comfortably. It sits against your right leg. Hopefully your pants or dress or skirt or whatever you're wearing is not partially muting the skin, because that will dampen the sound. Now notice, no hands. If you're finding that the drum doesn't want to sit comfortably in this position, it often helps to put a yoga block or a footstool underneath your left foot, and that should help you cradle the drum a little bit better. Another possibility is to get a lower chair, and that will help it just sit more naturally there. One thing that people sometimes do is they anchor their left elbow on the drum. Now, that can be okay some of the time. I do it sometimes if I'm being lazy or just conserving energy. But if you develop the habit of needing to have your elbow there at all times to control the drum, that can slow you down a little bit in the long run. For example, if you get to the point of trying to learn three-finger rolls, like, or split hand technique. For those kinds of things, you're going to want your elbow up. So you may not want to get too dependent on having your elbow stuck to the drum there. Now, it's important to understand that there's not necessarily one correct way to do these techniques. There are lots of great players out there, and there are lots of different ways that they do the techniques. What I'm going to be showing you in this video is mostly what works for me. But I encourage you to watch other tutorials as well and find out what other people are teaching, you know, on YouTube, on DVDs, people you meet, ask them how they do what they do. And eventually, by taking in all that information, you can synthesize it into a system that works for you. One thing that is pretty universal, though, for drumming is that you're going to need to be able to relax and breathe while you're playing. Now, on to the three hits. The Doum, the tek, and the ka. First off, let's do the Doum. Now, the Doum is the most important hit on the Darbuka, because I'd say probably 90% of the time, the Doum is what's going to be on the one. The Doum is the bass note. So to get a good Doum, start off by hold your hand up like this, flat, fingers together. Now, relax it a little bit. And you'll find that when you relax, your fingers, your hand, your palm, naturally cups a little bit. And that's the right position for the Doum. So the part of my hand that I'm using for the Doum, the part that's striking the skin of the drum, is from the tip of my middle finger here to about halfway down my palm. All of that is striking the skin, and then the rest, this back part here, is hitting the rim of the drum on every hit. A common mistake beginners make when they're doing their Doum is they do it too far in. They try to aim for the center of the drum. And that doesn't sound good. It's kind of an inconsistent tone. It's flabby and not tight. So bring it back a little bit. My knuckles are pretty close to the rim of the drum when I'm doing my Doum. And the fingers are always together. Now, to get the right kind of force or motion, it's a little bit in the arm and a little bit of wrist snap. So it's sort of this motion. If I hold my arm up and exaggerate the motion a little bit, there's this kind of a motion where my arm is bringing in my wrist and my wrist is snapping when it gets there. So that's the Doum. Now for the tek. I think the tek, more than any other technique, there's a lot of variation in how different players do it. Some people use the pointer finger, some use the ring finger, some use the pointer, middle, and ring finger spread apart all at the same time. For me personally, I like to use, I sort of alternate between the pointer and ring finger. I use the pointer finger for hard teks and the ring finger for softer teks. I don't encourage you to do that if you're just starting out on the drum, because it's like too many things to juggle at once. You should probably try out the pointer finger, try out the ring finger, see what feels more natural to you, and then develop that. And then if you want to bring the other one in later in your practice, once you have the basic techniques and rhythms down, then you can start experimenting with doing that. So how do you get a good tek? It's actually very similar to the Doum. You're using a little bit of your arm to bring the wrist in, and then you're snapping the wrist. And it's important to use just the right amount of finger, which I find is just this last segment here. If you line up this inner knuckle, the knuckle line there, if you line that up with where the skin meets the rim, that's going to be a pretty good tech. But you got to have the arm movement and the wrist snap to really get it. The most common beginner mistake with the tech is people try to use the muscles in their finger to do the technique. And that doesn't result in a good tech. You have to make the finger super relaxed. It's really just along for the ride. The action is in the arm and the wrist. Now if you go too far in, use too much of your finger, it gets kind of thuddy. You get a little bit of doom in your tech, and you don't want that. And if you're too far out, it gets really quiet or there's no tech there at all. So you want to use just the right amount of finger, which is really just this last segment, this last phalange. So that's the tech. The ka is probably the trickiest of all the basic hits. Now the ka sounds like a tech. Here's a tech. Here's a ka. The ka is essentially the left-hand tech. But the technique for doing it is completely different due to the asymmetry of where your hands are in relation to the drum. For a ka, the technique is you're going to use the ring finger on your left hand, and you want to bring the arm down while twisting the wrist. So it's a combination of the downward motion of the arm and the twist in the wrist. And you can really get a good, the more you snap that twist, the louder your ka is going to be. And the more altitude you get in your arm, the louder the ka is going to be. So if I'm down here, that's a really soft ka. If I want to get a loud ka, more altitude, sharper wrist twist. So here, much like the tech, the common beginner mistake is to try to do it using the muscles in your finger. And you're not really going to be able to get a very good ka doing that. So remember, bring the arm down and twist the wrist. And then my ring finger strikes right where the skin meets the rim of the drum here. And look at the angle. It's not perpendicular. It ends up, due to the wrist twist, it ends up being almost like parallel to the ground, but not quite. And when you're doing your ka, don't be afraid of smacking the side of the drum with the side of your palm here. That's totally fine. I do it pretty much every time when I do the ka. It's not so much that smacking the drum helps, it's just that when you're doing the ka correctly, you're inevitably going to smack the drum. Okay, now that you know the three basic hits of the drum, let's put them into a rhythm. If there's one rhythm that every belly dancer knows by name, it is Beledi. And Beledi goes doom, doom, tek, doom, tek. That's the basic Beledi. So we're just going to use the doom and the tek for now. We'll leave the left hand out of this. 3, 4. Now let's make it a little more interesting. We're going to bring in the left hand and we're going to do a filled Beledi. And first we'll try it really slow and then we'll bump up the tempo a little bit. So it's going to go doom, doom, tekka, tek, doom, tekka, tekka. Now let's try that a little faster. Doom, doom, tekka, tek, doom, tekka, tekka. Now you may have noticed that some of the letters in the notation up there are capitalized, whereas others are lowercase. The capitalized letters are the accent notes. Those are the ones you want to stress. So I wouldn't worry about that too much right away if you're just learning this stuff. But once you get more comfortable with getting your hits in the right place at the right time, then you can start thinking about accenting the accents. So to review the basic points of each technique, for the Doum, you want your fingers together. You want your hand just slightly cupped, and you use your arm and the snap in your wrist, and you always bounce off the drum. For the tek, it's quite similar, but you use your pointer finger or your ring finger, you use your arm and the snap in your wrist, and you bounce off the drum. For the ka, bring your arm down. As you're doing that, you twist your wrist so that your ring finger hits the drum right where the skin meets the rim here. With enough practice and enough hours put into it, you will eventually get to the point where you can do all of this on autopilot, and that's when things really start to get fun.